Good afternoon, honorable member of the European Parliament, Mr. Karleskind, dear speakers, dear ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Secretariat of the European Parliament Intergroup on Climate Change, Biodiversity and Sustainable Development, I'm delighted to welcome you to today's event, where we'll be addressing the need for effective protection of shellfish waters and specifically looking into ensuring access and quality of space. This is, of course, a very important topic, and it fits perfectly to the ambition and the vision of the European Green Deal, as I'm sure we will be hearing more of in the context of the event as we progress. This event is hosted by MEP Mr. Pierre Karleskind, Chair of the Fisheries Committee of the European Parliament. And just before we start, I would like to provide some housekeeping rules for our attendees today. So the event is going to be recorded. Therefore, the recording of the event will be made available at the ABCD website tomorrow. Also, presentations of speakers will be made available on the relevant website section. And then for the Q&A session, attendees can send us your questions via the Q&A box of the platform. So with no further ado, I'd like to provide the floor to hosting MEP Mr. Karleskind for setting the scene.
Thank you to all of us. I'm so pleased to welcome you here in this house, in the European Parliament. I'm pleased to welcome all the speakers. I would like to thank them to be here and to be available for this discussion, which is really important. We've just spent 2 days, 1 day and a half, in the Fishery Committee, and there is one thing that was always in the air, or how should I say, in the speeches of my colleagues, or in my own speeches, my interventions in the Fishery Committee, is the link between the economic activities that are fisheries and aquaculture and the quality of the environment. This is something which is more and more seen as crucial, as central, if we want to achieve all the objectives that we have. And when I'm talking about objective, is of course about the environmental way of doing environmental things, but also on economic things. And what we see is that aquaculture is a real proxy of this quality of the environment. This is an activity which is at the forefront of this question of the quality of the environment. Just a few words about aquaculture and why this meeting today is at a crossroads of different priorities. We've been talking a lot of food security since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, but we were talking about that even before. We are talking about the fact that we in Europe, we still depend by 70% of the importation for the seafood we consume. It's 70%. So we are far from being autonomous on this very question. And if you look at the global figure of the production, the EU sector accounts for less than 2% of the global production. So we have really to deal with a big, which is also a great challenge on this. A challenge for the economy, but a challenge for producing food and producing high quality food. I was talking also about economic activities. There is something that I often highlight in my intervention or speeches on aquaculture, is that this is a really located activity. And when I say located, it's all along our coastline in Europe, but this is also in small villages when we are talking about continental aquaculture. So this is something that provides economic activities in really small towns, that maintain activities even in towns that we think are almost, how should I say that, maybe sleepy or too small to have activities. But this is a year-long, all along the year activity, and this is something really important. And what we have to deal is about building a sustainable future. What we know about aquaculture, and I'm so happy to be with the shellfish producer, is this is a low carbon footprint activity. And then we are now facing a really big challenge about climate change. And this might be a solution, not the solution, but part of the solutions that we have in front of us. If we want to succeed in addressing all these challenges, we have clearly to watch what has to be done. And one of the biggest things is the water quality. I was with you, Philippe, a few weeks ago in your region, in our region, in fact, and we had this conversation with shellfish producers that were facing variability of this quality of the water. And that is something that has too much impact on their activities and too much impact on what they can do for achieving the objectives that I was talking about. Concerning our work in the PECH committee and in the European institution in general, I'm not going to talk about what the Commission is aiming to present, but what are we now so far on this question? We've been working on the COVID-19 aid package, and this is something important. We have reacted at the beginning of the crisis to be sure that aquaculture is supported through the European mechanisms in order to face these issues. We always consider aquacultures, always, in our regulation. This hasn't always been the case by the past, but now it is clearly a great and a really important topic. I was talking about the Commission communication. We had the communication on the strategic guidelines for a more sustainable and competitive EU aquaculture for the period to 2021 to 2030. These guidelines are important. This is a real objective of the European Union, and we are really repeating it almost in each fishery committee meeting. We have to enforce, we have to develop aquaculture in our European Union. We have to make things more simple. We have to make things more reliable for them. And we have to simplify the procedures, minimizing the number of authorities, and make them more efficient. When we were talking with this producer, we are seeing people asking, how could I deal with this question of the quality of water? Who is responsible for him? Is this the national government? Should I ask to the mayor of my city? Should I ask to the president of the region? And they all say, no, it's not me, I have to do something, but you also have your responsibility. But the fact is that at the end of the day, the producer, he doesn't care about who is responsible for. He needs to have clear answers to his question. And this is our goal. And this is why we have a responsibility here in the European Parliament to take into account and to be tough on the necessity of simplification. We will soon have, no, I'm not saying we will soon have, we voted today a report in the Fishery Committee, an initiative report written by our colleague Clara Aguilera on aquaculture and on the development of aquaculture. That I would like to underline this, because this is the meaning of this report is really that the Fishery Committee cares about aquaculture and that we wanted to react to the guidelines of the Commission. Two key messages. We have to be sure that we are able to supply sustainable aquatic food to the EU. It is absolutely crucial. I'm not going to repeat it again. Yes, I will repeat it again. We import 70% of the seafood that we consume. So if we are not convinced that food security must be tackled by the aquaculture, is that we do not understand anything. And the second thing is that we need to have high environmental and animal welfare standards as a key. These two things. Because we know that we are in Europe, and if we want to have quality food, we can have it, and we can afford this. And I will finish simply by one thing, one emerging thing, because it's been theorized for years, but now I think we are ready. There is this proposition from the Delors Institute, which was also in the Horizon project about restoring the quality of our ocean. This is one of the big missions that the Horizon program has been programming will be programming now. And the main goal is to restore the quality of our waters. This is one of the 5 big missions that this research program has. So that is to show how it is important. So on this word, I'm not going to be longer. I think I'm already too long for my introduction, but I really wanted to highlight how important what we are talking tonight is important for the European Union. We are at the center of the main challenges that we are dealing here in this very house. So once more, thank you. I'm sorry I will remain with you during several dozens of minutes, but I will have to leave before the end of the conference. Once more, thank you and enjoy this meeting.
Thank you very much, dear Member of the European Parliament, Mr. Pierre Karleskind, for setting the scene with regards to both the importance but also the timely nature of today's discussion to follow, looking at current challenges, the need for food security, environmental sustainability, but also the key opportunities that shellfish aquaculture can provide towards this direction. Our speaker to follow is Mr. Philippe Legal, President of CNC France. So I would like to seamlessly transition to you for your presentation today.
Mr. President, honorable Parliament member, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's a pleasure for me to be here today on behalf of the French shellfish sector in this house where European law are being made. Pierre Karleskind has invited me to tell you more about the great benefits of shellfish. I am more than happy to do so and very thankful for this opportunity. Let me kick off the discussions by introducing you to the 3 main benefits of shellfish farming, which are also their 3 reasons with our sector deserves more attention in the EU sustainable blue economy. First, shellfish have undeniable health benefits for the consumer. Shellfish have been feeding people. They are particularly rich in iodine, vitamin D, and B12, copper, zinc, iron, and selenium. Our mollusks are generally known to be healthy, offering a very low caloric intake. Oysters only have 68 calories per 100 grams. As a result, shellfish algae account for more than 50% of EU aquaculture products. The second benefit of farmer shellfish is its positive impact on the environment. Scientists have recognized that the carbon footprint of the farming cycle is close to neutral. With Europe aiming for climate neutrality by 2030, shellfish farming is already greatly contributing to this objective and can claim to be part of the solutions. Let me emphasize that shellfish are aquatic animals that will reside in the open sea or in lagoons that do not receive any extra feed or direct treatment. Not only are their know is low impact food, but they can also directly contribute to climate change mitigation thanks to the numerous ecosystem services they provide, natural coastal protections, water filtrations, and the especially nitrogen sink. The source benefit is related to the social economy of the coast. Most of our business in Europe are family micro-enterprises, which create and maintain jobs in the EU coast. Because this job cannot be relocated. Many other jobs generally in this area depend directly or indirectly on our activity. 4 persons employed in our company. 5 are employed on land. Our shellfish farmers contribute to sustainable restitution of adult blue in the coastal territory of the EU. Now, some words to conclude. All these benefits are offered by our shellfish, but to thrive, shellfish farming needs better water quality. The slow but continuous degradation of Europe's coastal waters makes our professional at risk and is a crucial challenge for the European Union. With today's events, we want to express the need for better protection of shellfish waters so that the 3 benefits I mentioned for the consumer, for the environment, for the coastal territory can provide a solid basis for tomorrow, food security and sustainable food system in Europe. Thank you for your attention. I wish you fruitful discussions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Philippe Legal, for presenting us the key advantages of shellfish aquaculture, which is indeed ticking all the boxes when it comes to benefits for human health, contribution to Sustainable Development Goal 2 in feeding the world, but also its positive impact for the environment. You referred to its low carbon footprint, and then also its contribution to climate change, alongside, of course, its contribution to the socioeconomic angles as well. So thank you very much for underlining these points. Our next speaker is Ms. Veronica Manfredi, Director of Directorate C on Zero Pollution within DG Environment in the European Commission. And I think it's an intervention that we're all very much looking forward to. So Ms. Manfredi, the floor is yours. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, it is actually my turn to thank you very much for the invitation, and particular thanks, of course, to Chair Pierre Karleskind for his very kind words. And you will hear a lot of things that have already been said, actually, in my intervention, because I think we are united across this table, and I'm sure also online, to recognize also that with the war unfolding in Ukraine, with all its repercussions on the global economy, including of food security, and of course with the effects of climate change that become increasingly tangible, together with the impacts of biodiversity, pollution, and the resource crisis as such, more than ever, we see that the EU needs to improve its management of critical resources, including, of course, water, primary, and in general, food. More than ever, the Commission is indeed focusing its effort on driving forward the goals outlined in the European Green Deal and set out in the key policy initiative that, as you know, we've been putting forward at impressive speed over the last years and months to adapt to the ongoing crisis and catalyze the shift towards a more sustainable socio-economic model. Space and access to resources are, however, limited on our densely populated and largely exploited continent. In particular, European water resources need to be managed in a much more efficient and sustainable way to meet our multiple and diverse needs, including in terms of energy production, food production, and the development of other activities for the well-being of our society at large. So abundant and safe resources of water are indeed key to a resilient economy, not only in terms of agricultural irrigation, cooling and cleaning for industrial processes, but also to enhance the EU's strategic autonomy for untapping our potential in sustainable aquaculture, including through shellfish farming. Since the year 2000, the EU Water Framework Directive has been a driver for progress in the stewardship of our water resources. This directive requires all member states to prevent further deterioration of the EU freshwater bodies, as well as coastal areas, and to achieve their good status by 2027. These goals are further supported by other key pieces of the EU acquis, and I think here in particular of the Nitrates Directive, of the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, which is soon to be revised, but also, for example, of the Industrial Emission Directive, which applies to the largest part of our largest chemical industrial pollution, to mention just one. Despite progress, the situation of many of our water bodies is still not satisfactory. I also think that member states have precisely in these days, in these months, a crucial opportunity under their third cycle of river basin management plans to boost progress. At sea, the Marine Strategy Framework Directive aims to achieve and maintain clean, healthy, productive and resilient EU seas and ocean with the aim of achieving their good environmental status. Some of the criteria to determine good status are directly linked to decreasing the impact of water pollution by nutrients, by chemicals, by litter on coastal and marine ecosystems. Again, also in this area, the progress in implementation has been slow, but the Commission is working hard with all member states to improve the situation and will not hesitate to further use the means at its disposal, including legal action where necessary. While the Water Framework Directive and the Marine Strategy Framework Directive are cornerstones of EU water policy, several other Commission initiatives are pursuing the goal of marrying sustainability with a healthy economy and secure access to resources. I would like in particular to stress the Farm to Fork strategy, which emphasises the need to move towards sustainable food production, including in the fish and in the seafood production sector, as well as the Zero Pollution Action Plan, which contributes to preserving our water resources by setting the framework for tackling pollution at source and along all its key pathways, including, of course, special attention to pollutants of emerging concern, and this for one goal: enhance the protection of biodiversity and of human health. In this context, I would like to particularly highlight our recent proposal to revise the Industrial Emission Directive, which I think is really important in a point in time we are discussing so much about water pollution. Of course, all the work which is ongoing across all member states in CAP strategic plans, as we know that often agriculture is also a very important source of pollution, and our upcoming proposal to revise the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive that I've already mentioned. In the very recently published proposal for nature restoration law, we have outlined ambitious targets to restore all ecosystems and their related services by the year 2050, on par with our climate mitigation and adaptation efforts. And also the upcoming action plan on fishery resources and marine environment will spell out ways to reconcile growth with enhanced protection and restoration at sea, which is the spirit of the entire Sustainable Blue Economy strategy. In May 2021, the Commission has adopted, and Honourable Member Karleskind was referring to them, these strategic guidelines for a more sustainable and more competitive EU aquaculture, which clearly recognise the important role also of shellfish production, both in revitalising local economies and in terms of environmental services, because also, you didn't mention, but shellfish farming contributes to cleaning water, which is great. At the same time, we also recognise that shellfish farming is confronted with spatial planning problem. This is one of the reasons why, in those guidelines, the Commission has also committed to produce further guidance to the Member States on spatial planning and access to water for marine aquaculture. And this will see the light, normally, I'm told by colleagues, by this year end. In this context, the Maritime Spatial Planning Directive is a particularly useful tool as it helps member states to ensure the coexistence of various activities. And while the national plans prepared so far do not go in great details regarding the zonings related to shellfish farming, we would encourage member states to make full use of this instrument to sustainably untap the full potential also of these activities. Finally, I am happy to confirm that we are also working hard on guidance on the environmental performance of aquaculture. Honourable Member Karleskind was saying it at the very beginning, impossible to proceed unless we create win-win situations, and also to clarify, and I think this is something very important for the operators in the sector, the interplay between the various legal instruments that apply to it, and I'm thinking, for example, of the interplay between food hygiene requirement and environmental law. In a nutshell, I would like to ensure you that the Commission is fully committed to support Member States and stakeholders in better managing our water resources and our natural capital in general, with attention to developing the most cost-effective approaches in times of urgency and scarcity of resources as such. So I look forward to the debate, and thanks again for having me here tonight.
Thank you very much, Ms. Manfredi, for highlighting the importance of human health, biodiversity, food and water security and quality. Ms. Manfredi also referred to the current developments in Ukraine and how these have magnified the EU's need for abundant and safe resources to water for EU's strategic autonomy, but also for highlighting all relevant key policies and initiatives of the European Commission. So thank you once again for underlining the work and the vision of the European Commission in today's discussion. Moving on into today's event, I'm happy to introduce you to our set of 4 more excellent speakers to follow. So we have on board some physically and some remotely. Dr. Ad Smal, who is a professor and chair of the Sustainable Shellfish Culture at Wageningen University. Hello, Dr. Smal. We also have with us today Mr. David Bassett, Secretary General of ATIP. Good afternoon, David. I'm noting that Ms. Karin Dubsky, International Coordinator at Coast Watch Europe, is not connected at the moment, so we're looking into this. And then last but not least, Mr. Bruno Guillaumy, Secretary General of the European Mollusks Producers Association, who is joining us physically in the room. So thank you very much all for joining us today. And I would like to start this panel discussion by turning to Dr. Smal, as I would like to ask you, well, how far do you think that shellfish farming can be combined with other functions of marine coastal areas?
Well, thank you very much for the invitation to join the panel discussion. I look forward to interesting discussions and results. And what has been said today already is, I believe, a very good introduction to the issue of the shellfish. All the positive services have been addressed already, and I believe that could be stressed even more in the general public. So not everybody knows about that, and I believe now today it was addressed in various ways in a very concise way as well. And that means that we have a lot of potential to not only claim space for shellfish culture as such, but also to promote synergies of shellfish culture with other functions. And that is actually the core of the question, I believe. But before addressing that, I'd like to mention a few other issues related to the topic of today, particularly the need for clean water. And let's say production sites that have the proper water quality and what regulations are needed. I believe that is definitely a relevant or a critical boundary condition for shellfish culture. We know that, and I mean, there are already for a long time EU directives that should make this work, but apparently more is needed. So on the one hand, the issue of clean water seems to be a very old issue already, because everybody that cultures shellfish understands that the quality can be only guaranteed if you have the right water quality. But there are new issues in this field coming up, I believe, related to climate change and like let's say, vulnerability of boundary conditions in terms of storm frequencies and storm forces, harmful blooms, and other water quality issues. I mean, in the Netherlands, we now today deal with an issue called PFAS in the Western Scheldt that may be threatening the shellfish culture in the Eastern Scheldt. And I was quite surprised that this type of chemical pollution anno 2022 is still a big issue, a sort of surprise, while we know for many, many years that water pollution is a big, of course, error for everybody that wants to promote seafood. Okay, so this is not the core of my point, but I just want to address the issue anyway. The core of the point would be that we know that space is pretty limiting for shellfish culture, particularly if we want to address the issue of increasing the European production. The trend is a decrease in production. There is a paper of 2022 of Lamprades addressing that, and it's a trend for many years. And it has to be, there are many options and chances to turn this trend, but then the limiting factor in many countries in Europe is space. Of course, space should have the good quality, so the water quality is a boundary condition, but space is confronted with competing claims. That's what we all know, we all see. So I believe claiming space for shellfish culture may be much more effective and productive and useful if we can address the options for synergies, for combination with other activities that also claim space and need space. And the advantage of shellfish culture as being low food chain product that are having many, let's say, ecosystem services is that it can be combined with other activities. And I'll finish my address by naming a few. We all know the coupling with fish farming, the IMTA, integrated multi-trophic aquaculture, is a chance for both types of production. The use of shellfish to clean the water, it was already mentioned, to mitigate eutrophication, is also a nice synergy to beat pollution, not, let's say, not harmful pollution, but just eutrophication in combination with shellfish culture. It's applied in Scandinavia. Then a combination with nature conservation is particularly relevant because shellfish culture can enhance natural processes and natural qualities. Maybe we can come back to that later. And then, of course, if we talk about spatial claims for wind parks, wind farms in the sea, it's obvious that that is a very great opportunity for combining with low trophic, or let's say with aquaculture in general. It even is a basis for a reconstruction of the whole seafood production. And I also believe that a combination with recreation, with tourism, is not a core issue, but it can help also people to for people to have more understanding and more good feelings about shellfish aquaculture as well. So that is an option that I would like to address as well. And I leave it by that for now, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Small, as your expertise is very much valued. So thank you once again for highlighting the importance of water quality, access to space, and the need for further synergies there. Next on, I would like to turn to Mr. David Bassett, who is not with us physically in the room, but is so committed and keen on presenting us the great work of ATIP that is making it happen regardless of that. So thank you very much, David. I just wanted to turn to you to ask you, well, in addition to access to space and water quality, what further areas of research innovation do you think will support and develop a successful European shellfish sector?
Thank you very much for the question. Thank you very much for the invitation to be with you this afternoon. Just before I answer that question, actually, the reason I can't join you in person this afternoon is because I'm currently attending the All Atlantic Ocean Research Forum ministerial events that are taking place in Washington, D.C. And one of the key outputs of this meeting will be the adoption of a new declaration that's being signed at a ministerial level, committing Atlantic nations, and that obviously includes the EU, to supporting ocean science across a number of different thematic areas. And most interesting for me and topical to this event today is a commitment both to boosting sustainable blue economy for Atlantic nations and to addressing food security. And within food security, specifically through low trophic and integrated multi-trophic aquaculture. And I think that's very interesting. If we recall Monsieur Carleskin's opening remarks, looking at 70% of import of seafood product into the EU and the 2% global production figure, I think from our own European perspective, focusing on that food security issue is very important. So at the highest level, in terms of international scientific collaboration, I think it's very helpful to see shellfish taking the rightful place that it should occupy in that debate. However, to go back to your question, addressing further areas of research and innovation, first of all, I would emphasize that access to sites and water quality are, of course, the key issues to address. So I'm not going to take away from that in any regard. Innovation can be applied here too. And whilst many of the issues relating to siting and water quality management are at a devolved and member state level and should be, that does not mean that innovative best practice cannot be shared and cannot be exchanged between production regions. And much greater interregional collaboration will have a role to play here. And it's encouraging to see that there's work going on in that field. And we're looking here at smart specialization strategies, greater alignment with the European Regional Development Fund, greater work with DG Regio, and alignment between the Commission, the Committee of the Regions and the Parliament is all very helpful here in promoting and fostering regional exchange of best practice of how things are done in certain areas. And hopefully we can overcome some of the challenges that the devolved and member state approach takes by greater interregional collaboration. Some other areas I would flag, one of the issues relating to a block relates to purification. And so here, if we are looking at developments in forecasting for example, of toxic bloom events, of harvesting and of storage facilities for harvested product, that would assist. Purifying technologies that would assist, and standardizing protocols for purification, harvesting and storage would be helpful. There's an increasing emphasis on offshore production. And now offshore production is not going to be the panacea that solves all the problems, but an increase in offshore production would be beneficial, as would, as we've already referenced, multi-use sites. And it's interesting to see that case studies in that will be funded within Mission Ocean, looking at the Baltic Sea and multi-site use between renewable energy and aquaculture and blue mussel production. There are issues relating to the sustainability of the sector. My apologies. Sustainability within the sector. For example, looking at increasing use of biodegradable materials within the sector as a replacement for plastics. If you're looking at specific species, for example, for oysters, there could be more work done on stock assessment and on research on disease-resistant strains. So in general, before I go into too many specificities, at an EC level, there could be greater funding of shellfish within the Horizon Framework Programme, specifically looking at shellfish issues. And in general, there could be a greater synthesis of research and innovation strategies looking at the inclusion of aquaculture from a food security and aquatic food perspective. I also think that in general it would be helpful to acknowledge the structure of the shellfish industry. As the latest STECFA report demonstrated, of the 16,000 registered aquaculture production businesses in the EU, some 80% of those are micro businesses. So that's companies of under 10 people. And applying research and innovation outputs to those small-scale family businesses is a challenge. We also were hearing in those introductory remarks of the coastal, remote and rural nature of most aquaculture production. And again, that can be a barrier to research uptake. So I think we need to address that issue of actually taking research outputs to smaller scale businesses. And finally, I think quite often we think of research and innovation from a highly scientific and technical point of view, but we should also think of the social science perspectives of what we're doing. And the promotion of the social license of shellfish cultivation and of low trophic aquaculture in general is very important. We've heard already this afternoon some of the benefits, and it's an easy story to sell for shellfish production. Low carbon, minimal inputs, a high area of growth, for example, as the UMOFA reports have demonstrated for increasing the organic production in the EU, the health benefits of shellfish consumption, the nutritional benefits of shellfish consumption. It's an easy story to sell, but we don't do it enough. And I think promoting the social license aspects of it will help drive the sector. So it's a very broad subject area to consider what areas of research and innovation could be looked at. But hopefully those are some ideas for you and for the audience to consider how we can further develop the sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David, for your remarks, referring to the need for regional collaboration, but also the need to support and promote innovative best practices. Mr. Bassett also referred to purification, offshore production, sustainability-related challenges, looking into replacements for plastics, the need for further funding via the Horizon Framework Programme, the need to acknowledge the structure of shellfish industry, referring to smaller scale businesses, and of course the social components as well, looking into promotion of the social license of shellfish cultivation. So thank you very much, David, for making these points. And noticing that Ms. Karin Dabski, our next speaker, is not yet connected, I'll just be giving a fresh plot twist to the event today by turning to Mr. Bruno Guillaume, as I think it would be with great pleasure to have your point of view as well in the discussion, to hear more perhaps about some facts and stats when it comes to shellfish aquaculture, and potentially some thoughts and suggestions for EU policymakers today. So Bruno, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Elias, for that, and thanks to Mr. Karlskent for the invitation and the opportunity to express what the shellfish farmer minds about the quality of their water and of the water in general. So next, please. Next slide. Thank you. So what are the facts? Philip said at the beginning in the introductory words, what are the main benefits, and had tell us about some points. David mentioned also the nutrition, the nature, and so on, and he said it is easy to tell, but we don't do it sufficiently. Okay, so nature, nutrition, and health. So all of that, we know all the benefits and the three main aspects of the benefits that shellfish gives. That I don't continue on that point, but I would like to emphasize some other aspects. Next, please. Next. So what about the production we are talking about? At the beginning, Mr. Karlskent said we are importing 70% of the seafood from other countries. in the world. So what about the shellfish productions? That's the last 2020 data provided by CSTP and Eurostat. So while producing, we put onto the market more than 550,000 tons. And we are representing 56% of the production of the EU aquaculture, mainly from Spain, and the second country is France, and then Italy, a little in Ireland and Netherlands, and especially three species: oysters, mussels, and clam. Next, please. And this is produced by a little bit more than 7,000 enterprises with 37 people, of which about more or less 10,000 women, so are not so bad for at the gender level, and a little bit more than 30,000 vessels. But despite what the mainly idea of EU citizens, we occupy only less than 1% of the EU coastal waters for the production of what I did remember in the next slide. So next slide, please. And it has not been sufficiently expressed, but here is some figure and facts extracted from the last economic aquaculture reports from CSTP, STOCF at the EU level, so the report from the data collection on fisheries and aquaculture, reported by the member states to the Commission. And so here you can see in the detail that oysters, mussels, and clams in that rank are economically viable and sustainably viable. We are with sufficiently added value and EBITs necessary for producing a turnover in 2020 of 950 million euros. So next slide, please. I said 1% of the EU coastal waters. What is this EU shellfish domains in 2019? So 51,000 concession, the Commission said licenses, we said concession, because we are on the public domain. Mr. Karlsken reminded in his introductory words that it is not simple to ask who is responsible for the quality of this water. But we are on the public domain of the states, that the water of the states themselves. So the main responsibility is from the member states. And the Commission has the role to organize a frame for that. So we have the Water Framework Directive, the Marine Strategy Directive, that's the framework for that. But that the member states who are responsible. And we are occupying just 1,100 kilometers in that coastal waters. And especially not in the coastal water, but mainly in the transitional waters of the EU, if we want to enter into the detail. Because our activities, David expressed that it is an idea to go offshore, but today we are onshore, on the tidal zone, which is very, very, very near the shore. So next slide, please. So what is the main domain and the main concentration is in Ireland, which is a new states opening the shellfish cultivation since a few years. And so there is 600 concessions for this surface which is occupied. But just bear And next slide, please. In Italy, so you see that the small areas are very, you cannot see them. To see exactly where they are, we need to zoom in, because we are not occupying all the coast, despite what I said previously. We are concentrated in some very few areas, not never. It's not a very huge domain. Next, please. Next slide, please. To see now Spain. Spain is concentrated in Rayas, and we need also to zoom in to see exactly where the concession are. And so, next slide. And in the Netherlands, it's the same. There is a few concentration, a few shellfish beds and shellfish concessions for a very few surface occupied by our activities. Not so much. Next, please. And in France, also you can see the blue is the coastal water, the clear blue is the transitional water, and the red points are the concessions. And maybe it's in France that we have not the most important concession, but we have just the surfaces occupied. And I can mention 3 concessions, 3 licenses in Ireland that are biggest that all that French concession together. So it's in the Ireland, the concession are not fully exploited, of course. So there is a little bit possibility to extend it. So next slide, please. And despite all that situation, and it has been said by said that the trend is downward since the last 30 years. Here you are the evolution of farmers in France, the evolution of the production, the evolution of the surfaces. Everything is downward. Not because in the first figure I presented on the last 5 or 6 years, it seems that the trend is stable or slowly increasing, but it's just a recovery after the big downward trends from the 10 last years and more of that of the 20 years. So next slide, please. And this is a contradiction. The contradiction is now today the Commission said and the Parliament said we are part of the solution. We need to develop aquaculture. It's said by the Commission since 20 years. The water are officially, theoretically protected by, it was in the past, the shellfish directive, and now it's the water framework directive and it's Annex 4. But really, it's on the paper, that theory. We focused on the quality of the water inland, and here you can see in front the water quality at the 2 levels. Bacterial level and ecological level. So officially the quality of the water which is guaranteed by the law, by the EU law since 40 years, 4 decades, is equivalent to the grade A defined by the hygiene package, which is today less than 30% in France. So we should be 100%. We are 30. And the good or very good status is only in transitional water in France reached by 25% of the mass transitional water so and a little bit that more than 50 for the ocean, for the coastal waters, which are more offshore, of course. So it's not complicated. So what next, please? That's a sad trend, but we need an effective protection. As I said, it is written in the law that we are protected, but indeed not. We don't have that. The fact said, the production decrease, the space decrease, and the number of enterprises decrease, and the quality of the water at the microbiological decrease, but microbiological level decrease, and the ecological is not satisfactory. So we need AAC, the Advisory Aquaculture Council, recommended in last October 2019, three recommendations to the Commission and the Member States, but especially that was the Commission. First, to establish new guidelines or revising the existing one, because there is a specific guidance to explain how this Appendix 4 of the Water Framework Directive should be implemented by Member States. And it's not sufficiently, but it's the first proposal that the AAC made to the Commission. The second is to set up, to write in the framework of the, at this time, it was the time of the review of the Water Framework Directive, fitness check. So the proposal was to change the annex and to reward it to this Annex 4, which is clearly insufficiently understood by Member States, because the annex talk about high interest species, not shellfish waters. And the Commission said from a long time, I do recognize it, that it was exactly the same definition than shellfish waters. But for people and citizens who care about the waters, species of interest and shellfish water protection has not the same sense. And for Member States, maybe not, because we saw that it is not correct. The result, the proof is onto the table. And so the third recommendation was to set up a daughter directive under this Water Framework Directive, exactly like it was made for bathing water. So next, click, please, because so the Commission said the Commission said the option 2 isn't possible because the fitness check said no. There is no need to review and to change nothing to Water Framework Directive. Okay, the Commission, we met with the Commission, and the Commission said no. The option 3 is too complicated. It's too something not for today. Maybe one day, but not for today. So the first option was onto the table to renew the guidance. Click, please. So, click again. So, in last June 2020, the Advisory Council on Aquaculture released a new recommendation about the strategic guidelines for the sustainable development of aquaculture and developed specific recommendation for shellfish to the Commission. And we proposed to integrate option 1 in the guidance, the option 1 of 2019. Click, please. So the Commission accepted 90% of what we proposed, except this option 1, which is not included in the guidance. So next, please. Next. Click, please. So we are now revising the bathing water quality. The bathing water quality is under the review of the EU, and the Commission adoption is planned for the beginning of next year. So, an option 4 would be for the Parliament to extend the scope of this bathing water directive to shellfish waters, because we do the constatation that for the very small areas that are the beaches in the EU, the result is correct indeed. And this bathing water quality directive is a multi-criteria, including bacteriological ones. And so we need now to have this bacteriological included the noroviruses on the table. So a first idea would be to extend the scope of this Daughter Directive to shellfish waters specifically. And click please. And the last idea we have is to, in the frame of what a marine special area, protected area is, to recommend to the member states, because these areas are defined in an international framework, but that's up to the member states to define as an area and to give it a specific status as a marine protected area. So what the Parliament could do is a resolution to the member states to convince them to consider that the shellfish water should be protected under this specific protection, because there are small areas that need a specific protection, including many aspects of what is inland. And in the frame of the zero pollution mentioned by Mrs. Manfredi, we are sorry to constate that noroviruses are not included up to date. So, and this is the main problem of our areas. So recognizing that an area has a specific status, the legal status of shellfish can ensure protection, can ensure access, can ensure legal protection. Because today we have a problem of acceptance by people, you know, and there is many protests in courts of justice. And if there is no legal status of the water, the judge has many difficulties to decide if it is an area for the shellfish production or it is an area for the protection of the nature. And so we need clear text, clear definition, clear words that have a sense and cannot be disputed. So that's up to the Commission to propose the law, up to the member state and to the Parliament to define the law, and then we can be able to implement and unlock the potential. Okay, so we have many possibilities that have been very clearly defined, and thanks to them by Ad and David previously. So we have many possibilities. We recognize that we are a part of the solution, as Mr. Kalleskind said it at the beginning, and Mrs. Manfredi said it also. So we are happy that there is a change of paradigm in the EU institution minds. Now we need to have concrete proof of that on the ground, in the field, because I remember, since 40 decades, our areas are protected officially in the text. But the reality is, and the facts and the data are what I said and what I presented, a decrease, slow but continuous decrease. Next. And thank you for the attention. Next, please.
Thank you very much, Bruno, for highlighting within your presentation the multiple advantages, once again, for food security, nutrition, environmental sustainability, but of course, equally so for the very important challenges for shellfish industry, for shellfish aquaculture nowadays. Of course, it's time to reverse the paradigm and effectively and correctly protect shellfish waters and shellfish beds, as mentioned within your presentation, referring also to some concrete policy recommendations, both for the European Parliament as well as for the European Commission. So thank you very much for making these points today. And cautious of time management, I would like to very quickly then turn to our panelists for today's event, starting once again with Dr. Small, to ask you very quickly what would be then your key takeaways for today's discussion. What would you like the audience to take home today?
At first, I believe that Bruno made a very good story. So that should be taken home in the first place, about the concrete proposals for adding rules to the existing regulations. But from my point of view, I believe also in the field of spatial planning, which is probably a bit more complicated story in terms of regulations to get it implemented. Still, the message is that there is quite a lot of space available of good quality near shore, but also offshore, and that is at some stage the future of shellfish culture, inevitably, I believe. So we need regulations to achieve that, and coupling with marine protected areas, for example, could be a tool, but also coupling with energy wind plants could also be a tool. So I believe following this line of reasoning and addressing the requirements in terms of regulations would be the issue to be further explored. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Small. And how about you, David? Is there perhaps any key takeaways?
Yes, and I'm going to try and say something different for the sake of variety in the comments that are fed back, as obviously that the last presentation from Bruno there was extremely strong and extremely important. But I think the takeaways I will focus on today, possibly because of what I've been working on and will be working on for the rest of this week, is that we need to consider the two factors. The first, at the highest level, we are talking about issues relating to food security and aquatic food within food systems and food security for the EU. And at the second end of that is that European shellfish and mollusk production provides a very easy solution to some of those food security challenges, whilst at the same time supporting the delivery of our environmental obligations and objectives that we're trying to achieve, in addition to our economic and regional objectives and missions that we're trying to achieve. So to look at it from that high level and to use that high level and shellfish solution to not lose sight of that as the motivation and the reason for overcoming the planning or regulatory or regional challenges that we face, because that's a bigger issue. Food security and the solution that shellfish can bring is a bigger issue. And so let's not lose sight of that in addressing the bottlenecks and blockages to the maximization of potential for the European sector.
Thank you very much, David, once again. And then, Bruno, how about you? What would you like the audience to take home today? Perhaps in one or two, 3 sentences then, summarizing the main points of your presentation.
Well, and thanks to David and Adam for the words. What I would like to emphasize is very simple. We all agree that there is a huge potential for shellfish. There is many space available for on the shore and offshore. Specialized on shellfish farming on a IMTA in combination with algae, for example. Maybe offshore in combination with wind farms. Why not? We are working on that. But we need a clear frame, a clear protection, and a clear dedication of that waters. If there is a clear framework that who names correctly that water, who say that water are made for shellfish farming and are protecting for shellfish, for specific protection, there is, we can discuss with the Commission of the detail. There is many. I don't have the time to enter into the detail now. But if that is made, we will make the dream true. The dream of Mr. Kabaka is to do not import shellfish from the third countries. We can make it true. We multiply by 5 this 1% occupied today, we reach 5% of marine protected area, specific marine protected area for shellfish, which is also one of the objectives of the Commission to reach 30% of the coastal area as an MPAs. So we can enter in that calculation, and we multiply by 4. We are just importing less now less than 70%. So if we multiply what we are producing today, we will be exporting shellfish outside the EU. So we will make that dreams true because we are viable economically, viable environmentally and socially. Because as it has been said, we develop jobs that can be relocated outside from the coastal area of the EU. So we all are online with the 3 pillars of what the sustainability is. So we need just that the Commission and the Parliament and the Council unlock the potential by clearly wording what shellfish water is and what the shellfish quality is and what kind of protection this water quality should be in the next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bruno, and thanks a lot to all panelists for joining us today and for making these points. I think this serves to also wrap the panel discussion of today. And then, well, already not mentioned in the agenda, I think it almost comes very naturally to turn to Ms. Veronica Manfredi to provide you once again the floor, perhaps for some early reaction with regards to the points addressed just before.
First of all, many thanks again. I think I have really listened with great attention. It's a topic that indeed does deserve revamped attention more than ever in the current context. I wanted to offer a personal thought. I heard so much about, say, the regret about the scrapping of the shellfish directive and the fact that the water framework directive potentially should be amended in order to offer a legal status for the shellfish activities. I think it wouldn't be the legally correct path, simply because today there is a key that regulates human activities to be carried out in a sustainable manner, and this is the fishery acquis. In the fishery acquis, we are regulating also aquaculture. For me, it remains a little bit an open question, and certainly a question that I will have to dig further with colleagues also in DG Mare, to what extent shellfish would deserve, in the context of the aquaculture regulation, specific legal status. And I think all the problems that have been highlighted tonight are really important and to be brought back homeward, brought back home. We have even a specific funding, as Chair Karleskind was reminding us all in the beginning, the MFAF, that is really looking at aquaculture. So I think the intentions are very, very good. For me, it remains a little bit a question mark to what extent really more is needed on the regulatory side, or ultimately we are rather facing a problem of implementation, as we see in a lot of human activities on transitional waters and at sea. And this is possibly the thought that personally will bring back to discuss further. But many, many thanks for the many interesting thoughts and data.
Thank you very much, Ms. Manfredi, for making these points. And then moving ahead into the agenda of today's event, I would like to turn to our audience today, either in the room in the European Parliament in Brussels or connected remotely through the platform, to check if there is perhaps any pressing question from your side as well for speakers before we wrap up today's event.
Selene Alvarez from the Pew Charitable Trust. So I think no one can really now question the crucial part, socio-economical part and cultural also of aquaculture. But yet there are many issues to tackle along with the wish to increase this production. We should be particularly worried, I think, about the status of the Nutri-Score that Mr. Bruno showed, because we are concerned about the water quality, the variations of it. So which are the substances that we are looking into, not only including eutrophication and algal blooms, but who is responsible as well, something that was also discussed here. And of course, which is the source? Are we also looking into climate change issues? So here I get to the bottom of my question. Are we going to address the elephant in the room, which is the plastics and microplastics issue that is posing? Mr. Bassett did mention this briefly also as an important issue. I was pleased to hear Director Manfredi on the plans of the Commission that has in the pipeline to tackle the pollution, including planning to revise the urban waste water directive. So my question will be, it was also initially for the Parliament, but as Director Manfredi is here, will we see more specificities on tackling microplastics runoff on roads, and also strict prevention of plastics reaching the marine environment, on top of what, well, already what is the Parliament working on, of course. That will be it.
Very briefly, yes, our determination to reduce plastic pollution, whether in the form of plastic litter or microplastic, remains very, very strong. Nonetheless, let's say the action through which this will materialize is very varied, and indeed through the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive we are going essentially to try and secure better filtering so that this doesn't reach transitional and marine waters precisely, and freshwater bodies in a number of cases. On the other way around, we are working also with the colleagues of the European Chemicals Agency, also to introduce a certain limitation via REACH. And other actions are planned in the framework of the implementation of the Circular Economy Action Plan, including the revision of the Packaging Waste Directive, which is also in the making. So plenty of activities. I must say that, yes, the determination to progressively visualize also the streams of pollution is very, very strong. You may know that at the end of this year, the European Commission will present for the first time the Zero Pollution Integrated Monitoring and Outlook report that is going to provide for the first time really a very clear picture of what's happening across air, waters, marine and salt and fresh waters, as I like to stress, and soil in an integrated manner. Because often, if we go really to the source, we see how much economically more efficient is to prevent certain problems. And there are a lot of technological solutions that today allow us to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Manfredi, once again. And is there perhaps any other comment or question from the floor? I see no questions are posed through the platform remotely. So, yes, Bruno.
Yeah, thanks, Mrs. Manfredi, for mentioning also the plastic, and I could add the endocrine disruptors. But I have expressed this previously, but again, don't forget that if many things are analyzed by the human health point of view, microplastics, specifically nanoplastics, and endocrine disruptors are also a threat to our products, not to human health, to animal health, but at a very small level, lowest level than the level for the human health. So if we don't take into account that need for the products and for the biodiversity, we will make our mollusks, our shellfish, at risk. So if we need to reach this very high level of protection, if we decrease the endocrine disruptors and the nanoplastic level in the sea, which is a big challenge, I recognize, but we need to have this in mind, clearly in mind, and to not forget to mention that, and to include them in a target, maybe in a future target. Not we can have a calendar for that, but we should include specific milestones to reach the level of quality which is needed by our products, not only for human health and human bathing, because this is a main problem. And shellfish are products that are the same from millennium, and now they are at risk because the concentration of many things that we don't know exactly has reached a level which is bad for the shellfish. So you know that the principle of ecotoxicity is, and we recommend that this indicators is added to the specific, to the calculation of what the specific shellfish water quality is, the ecotoxicity of the shellfish itself. This could be a new indicator in the frame of the good ecological status. Maybe this can be discussed in the revision of the guidance that the Commission would like to begin with us. But we are open to the discussion with the Commission on this main points. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bruno, for following up on these points. And I think that this brings us one step closer to finishing today's event. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank hosting MEP, Mr. Pierre Karleskind, and of course his great team for all the kind help in all steps of the event organization, as well as my colleague Regine from the Secretariat of the European Parliament Intergroup and everyone involved in the organization of this event. Thanks a lot to all speakers that attended today, either physically in the room in Brussels or remotely. And of course, all attendees for following today's event on the need for effective protection of shellfish waters. This would be the moment when I would be providing the floor to MEP Mr. Pierre Karleskind for his closing remarks, but due to unforeseen circumstances, Mr. Pierre Karleskind will not be available for providing this today. So I think on behalf of the Secretariat of the European Parliament Intergroup on Climate Change, Biodiversity and Sustainable Development, we all agree on the multiple benefits of shellfish aquaculture when it comes to health, food security, as well as the positive impact on environmental sustainability. There is key benefits as well for society and for the economy. And for all these reasons, it becomes obvious how perfectly it fits into the European Green Deal vision and ambition. However, one of the major problems encountered, in addition to access to space, is also the quality of space, specifically looking into the quality of water. And then looking in solutions, while these challenges remain open, I would like to thank all speakers again for their concrete policy recommendations that I am sure have been well received by hosting MEP as well as European Commission. So on this note, I would like to mention once again that I'm very much looking forward to continuing the discussion in the near future. And then on behalf of the Secretariat of the Intergroup, I'd like to wish you all the best. Have a relaxing summer break ahead, and then see you very soon as well. Thank you for being with us today.